Greetings, I'm Wesley Haun, agronomist with Tiger-Sul products. Thank you for joining me today as we discuss managing sulfur in wheat production. Wheat has high demand for sulfur. Sulfur can be the greatest yield limiting factor, maybe only second to nitrogen at times. Sulfur is needed for optimum yield and protein content in wheat, and it is that protein content that does enhance the baking quality of flour. Managing sulfur in wheat, we have predominantly two different forms. One is sulfate form and the other is elemental sulfur. The sulfate forms, you have ammonium sulfate, potassium sulfate, ammonium thiosulfate, which is half sulfate and half elemental sulfur. And then the other form is elemental sulfur. In our case, it's sulfur bentonite, which is our Tiger XP, which contains 85% sulfur. And I might note that comparing elemental sulfur and specifically Tiger XP at 85% concentration, when you look at all the sulfate forms, they're only in that 20 to 26% sulfate, which means when you're applying Tiger XP, you're putting on 3.5 times less product, but getting the same volume amount of nutrients in the form of sulfur. Tiger XP conversion to sulfate, here again, requires microbial oxidation. These microbes are native in the soil, and the function of those microbes, here again, depends upon the moisture, the soil temperature, sulfur particle size, and the bacteria population. Now, going back to the soil temperature, the optimum temperature is in about 65 degrees Fahrenheit up to about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is, here again, between the temperature and the soil moisture really enhances the microbial activity as well as the population. Now, these conditions generally coincide in midsummer, and generally that is on the late side for wheat to maximize sulfur uptake and plant utilization. So in order to try to manage that opportunity, here are some options that we offer to manage your sulfur application as it relates to Tiger products. Option one is to apply Tiger XP in the fall. Soil temperature is going to be low. In other words, it's going to be below that optimum temperature range, so the bacteria will not be active and no sulfur oxidation will take place. And without this sulfur oxidation, the elemental sulfur bentonite product remains in the soil, and there's no sulfate to leach out during the winter months. During the winter, you have the freeze and thaw process along with the wetting and drying. Those actions will further fracture those Tiger XP pastilles into even smaller particles, and hence the oxidation of sulfur in the spring after the soil temperature increases will be facilitated at a little faster rate. Option two is to apply Tiger XP in the spring pre-plant. You can do that as a broadcast method, and when you broadcast, you can leave it on the soil surface or wait until after a rain event and then shallow incorporate. In fact, that would be my preference, to shallow incorporate. After receiving a rain event, those pastilles will absorb moisture and fracture, and then just the impact of the raindrops in conjunction with the shallow tillage, you get further breaking apart and spreading of the sulfur particles, so that we enhance the soil contact with the various small particles, and in turn you will receive or obtain greater microbial contact with those sulfur particles and see a somewhat faster oxidation take place. And then the other option is to band the product with the planter at planting time. And then the third option is to apply sufficient Tiger XP with your previous crop. For example, if you have canola and rotate following with wheat, provide enough sulfur for the canola crop and the wheat crop. For example, if you're expecting 60 bushels per acre of canola and 75 bushels per acre of wheat, when you put the uptake needs of both of those crops together, that equates to 48 pounds per acre of actual sulfur. And then with the XP being 85%, you would need 57 pounds per acre of Tiger XP to give you the 48 pounds of actual sulfur. To this point, we have talked about the Tiger XP product, but at this point, I'd like to inform you of a Tiger combo, which is a product that we take ammonium sulfate prill and coat it with our Tiger 90 product, and gives us 60% sulfate and 40% elemental sulfur. The total amount of sulfur in this analysis is 50%. And since it contains a sulfate, we recommend it be spring applied. You can apply this broadcast pre-plant, or it can be banded with the planter, either beside the row. And we also have customers who like to apply it in the furrow with the seed. I would advise you to make note that it does contain ammonium sulfate, and ammonium sulfate has a much higher salt index as compared to elemental sulfur. But while using it with wheat tends to have a higher tolerance level of salt as compared to other crops such as canola. Then another question we receive is, how much sulfur do I actually need to apply? You know, we recommend doing soil tests, but understand that there's no standardized extraction methods that soil labs can use to provide an amount of sulfur present and be able to make a recommendation that will correlate back to a yield response. So with that in mind, we at Tiger-Sul recommend doing a tissue analysis in conjunction with soil samples to obtain at least a snapshot in time of the amount of sulfur that may be present. Now, another option is, on your farm, conduct strip trials. Those are conducted by taking a field and splitting that field and applying sulfur on part of it and leaving some strips or an area within that field that's not treated with sulfur, and then at harvest compare the differences in yield. Now, I suggest you do this in multiple fields or in the same field over multiple years to get a good feel for the response you will obtain from a sulfur application. So as part of trying to determine just how much sulfur you need in a crop, you need to understand there's a difference between nutrient uptake versus nutrient removal. For example, in wheat, we have uptake requirements for 75 bushel wheat at 18 pounds per acre of sulfate, whereas with crop removal, you have 10 pounds that's actually removed when you harvest the crop. That's in the grain itself. That's not counting the straw also. So if we make a recommendation like we do for phosphorus and potassium based upon crop removal, and we carry that over to sulfate, and notice we're only putting on 10 pounds versus we need 18 pounds of uptake. So we may shortchange ourselves by doing that. Granted, I understand there's mineralization of organic matter that can take place, and during that mineralization, sulfate is released. But the real challenge with that is it's very unpredictable from year to year and from field to field as to how much mineralization and how much sulfate will be released. Therefore, we recommend to use the nutrient uptake amount to make the sulfur recommendation. And another way to make assessments on needs for sulfur uptake on a by crop basis, with canola, for example, you need half a pound of sulfur per bushel, whereas with wheat it's 0.24 pounds of sulfur per bushel. And if you're working with oats, that drops down slightly to 0.20 pounds of sulfur per bushel expected harvested. And then looking at nutrient uptake over time, This is for small grains. It's taken from a trial conducted there in northern Saskatchewan, looking at wheat, barley, and oats. And notice, as you go from the tillering stage is when you start to see a rapid increase all the way through stem elongation, and at the heading is when it peak out with the highest demand of sulfur uptake on through maturity. And to look at a similar trial, this one is conducted in Kansas State University. This is done with a individual working on a master's thesis, evaluating uptake of sulfur by wheat throughout the various growth stages. And note, the uptake peaks at the growth stage of 10.5, which is at flowering. And that is maintained throughout the remainder of the plant till it reaches maturity. And also might note, look at the dark blue area in that graph with the which represents the amount of sulfur that's in the grain itself, which is a very high amount here again. So there again, coming back to the amount of sulfur there with the protein content and influencing the baking quality of the wheat. And this shows the peak growth stages of wheat. And notice at 10.5, which is what's referenced on the previous graph, this is at the flowering, and it's the one stage before you reach physiological maturity. So here again, this is at the very end of the growing stages of wheat, which is the highest demand for sulfur. So here again, that fits into the Tiger XP and the Tiger Combo products having the peak oxidation process taking place at mid-season to later part in the growing season, which is hence gives you a gradual release of the sulfur to enhance wheat growth uptake. And here's some wheat yields that we at Tiger-Sul have conducted wheat trials. This is average of 7 trials over 4 years. These trials were conducted in Saskatchewan and in Alberta. And notice that the untreated control received nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but no sulfur. Whereas with the XP, they also received nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in conjunction with the Tiger XP product. And notice we got 64.7 bushel yield, which is what, about a 5 bushel yield increase. And the same with Tiger Combo, exactly the same yield. Here again, both of these products offering similar yield responses between each other. So here again, we've over a wide range of growing conditions in multiple years shows a nice 5 bushel yield increase. So also our Tiger products fit well into the 4R stewardship program. Tiger products fit in with looking at the various sources, and with the XP product, we have a gradual oxidation taking place, which have your nutrient release as the oxidation progresses. So it's a very gradual, slow release type situation. You're also dealing with a high analysis product, which requires a lower rate of application. Timing. Tiger products can be applied in the fall or spring, specifically Tiger XP, and that's due to its functionality. And what I mean by that is it's a product that requires oxidation. If you apply it in the fall, the soil temperature is going to be low enough that no oxidation takes place, so you have no loss of the sulfate due to leaching during the winter months. Or if you apply it in the spring, you apply it early, you get the fraction of the pastils due to the soil moisture, and then the oxidation takes place as soon as the soil warms up then. Tiger products fit here as well from a rate standpoint. We can easily adjust the rate to meet crop needs. We obviously recommend following a soil analysis, and you have low application rates. Most crops, we're talking 20 to 50 pounds per acre of product. Therefore, we don't have such high rates and high amounts of potential loss into the environment. And then choosing the place at which you apply the product. It can occur by most application methods to enhance your crop yield. Here again comes back to the functionality of the product and how it works, as I explained earlier. So with that, I hope you received some information here that can be beneficial to you. If you have further questions or need further information, I encourage you to contact your account manager, or you can go directly to our website at Tiger-Sul.com. So with that, I thank you and have a good day.